high levels of food insecurity. About 70% were food insecure. Dairy consumption was fairly high, actually over the national average, but their clients were under consumption for fruit compared to the national average, but it was still fairly high at 80%. And that pretty much goes across. You can probably just look through the rest of the results there, because what I want to point out is that the bars in green are those that were statistically associated with poverty, which means that as the poverty measures changed, so did these indicators. And what we learned at ASAF, for example, is that the better off or the less poor a client, the more likely they were to consume dairy, the more likely they reported that their youngest child was born in the hospital, and more likely that they treated their water. And so the usefulness of the additional statistical tests that we ran was to help us think about our theory of change, that we could, for example, predict that if they were going to collect data on dairy consumption, that over time this measure should improve as poverty levels actually go down, or household poverty improves over time. So the next slide is for Equitas in India, and Alex will be reporting on their experiences later in this webinar as well. And so very similar results in use of the exact same indicators, but the one difference with Equitas, whereas ASAF, when they did their pilot, they did it across 5 different states. In Equitas, the pilot that we did was in Tamil Nadu. And the results that we have here are slightly different from the perspective of the statistical tests that we ran. So even though the averages look very similar, what we learned when we ran the statistical test is that it was actually the poorer the client, the more likely they reported receiving